Daniel Moore sat frozen in his chair, watching his blind date walk out of the restaurant without looking back. It was Christmas night. The room was full of families laughing, couples holding hands, children opening small gifts at their tables. And he was alone again, rejected again, because he'd answered one simple question honestly. Yes, he had a daughter. The humiliation burned through him like ice water. He reached for his wallet, ready to pay and disappear into the cold December night, when a voice behind him cut through the noise. "Excuse me," a woman said, her tone calm and direct. "I couldn't help but overhear. Would you be willing to hear me out before you leave?" Daniel turned slowly, expecting pity or curiosity. What he saw was something else entirely. The woman stood beside his table with no trace of sympathy in her eyes, only clarity, and something that looked almost like recognition. If you want to see where this story goes, how a single question on the worst night of the year became the beginning of everything, stick with me until the end. And please, drop a like and comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story can travel. Daniel Moore had stopped believing in Christmas miracles somewhere around the third rejection. The first woman had been polite about it. She'd smiled, touched his hand gently, and said she wasn't ready to be a stepmother. The second had been more direct. She'd simply stood up mid-conversation and walked away when he mentioned Emma. The third had laughed, actually laughed, and told him he should have disclosed that complication in his dating profile. Tonight was the fourth. Her name was Rachel. They'd been messaging for 2 weeks. She seemed kind in her texts, thoughtful in her questions. She worked in marketing, loved old movies, had a dog named Pepper. When she suggested meeting on Christmas night, it's quieter then, more intimate. Daniel had felt a flutter of hope he immediately tried to suppress. He'd left Emma with Mrs. Chen next door, the retired teacher who'd become something like family over the past 3 years. Emma had hugged him tight at the door, her small arms wrapped around his waist. "Have fun, Daddy," she'd whispered. "Maybe she'll be nice." "Maybe," Daniel had replied, kissing the top of her head. The restaurant was one of those cozy Italian places with soft lighting and red tablecloths. Christmas music played quietly in the background. Families filled most of the tables, parents helping children cut pasta, grandparents smiling over wine glasses. Daniel had chosen a seat facing away from them. Rachel arrived 15 minutes late, apologizing about traffic. She was prettier than her photos, with dark hair and an easy smile. For the first 20 minutes, everything went well. They talked about work. Daniel explained his job as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping company, and she told him about a campaign she was developing for a new restaurant chain. They compared favorite films. She ordered the ravioli. He chose the chicken marsala. Then she asked the question. "So," Rachel said, swirling her wine glass, "have you ever been married?" Daniel's stomach tightened. This was always the moment. He could lie, deflect, change the subject, but he'd tried that before, and it only made things worse later. "No," he said carefully. "But I have a daughter, Emma. She's 7. Rachel's smile didn't falter, but something shifted in her eyes. "Oh," she said, I didn't realize." "I mentioned it in my profile," Daniel said, though he knew it was buried in the third paragraph, easy to miss. "Right." Rachel set down her wine glass. "How long have you been... where's her mother?" Daniel had rehearsed this answer 100 times, trying to find the version that sounded least tragic. "She passed away when Emma was 4, cancer. It was quick." "I'm so sorry." Rachel's voice was gentle, but her body language had already changed. She leaned back slightly, crossed her arms. "That must be incredibly hard." "We manage," Daniel said. The rest of the dinner was polite but hollow. Rachel asked a few more questions about Emma, her age again, what grade she was in, whether she was well-adjusted. Daniel answered honestly, because what else could he do? Yes, Emma was shy sometimes. Yes, she still asked about her mother. Yes, being a single father was exhausting and terrifying and the best thing in his life all at once. When the check came, Rachel excused herself to the restroom. Daniel waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. He pulled out his phone and saw the text. "I'm sorry. This isn't what I'm looking for right now. You seem like a great guy, but I'm not ready for the stepmother thing. I hope you understand." She'd left through the back exit. Daniel sat very still, staring at the words on his screen. Around him, families laughed. A father lifted his toddler onto his shoulders. A mother wiped sauce from her son's chin. Couples leaned across tables, sharing desserts and secrets. The humiliation was physical. It sat in his chest like a stone, heavy and cold. He'd known this could happen. He'd expected it to happen. But somehow, on Christmas night, surrounded by all this warmth and light, it felt worse than usual. He signaled the waiter, paid for both meals, because of course he did, and stood to leave. His coat was still hanging on the chair. His scarf was tangled in the sleeve. He fought with it briefly, feeling the eyes of other diners on him, wondering if they'd noticed, if they knew. "Excuse me?" The voice came from behind him, calm and measured. Female. Daniel turned, expecting the waiter with a forgotten credit card, or maybe Rachel, returned to apologize in person. The woman standing beside his table was tall, probably 5'9", with straight dark hair pulled into a low ponytail. She wore a charcoal sweater and black pants, simple but expensive looking. Her face was striking, sharp cheekbones, direct gray eyes, the kind of beauty that came from bone structure rather than makeup. She looked to be in her early 30s. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, confused. "Do I know you?" "No," the woman said, "but I was sitting 2 tables over and I couldn't help but overhear parts of your conversation." She paused, seeming to measure her next words carefully. "I heard what happened. Your date leaving. The reason why." Heat flooded Daniel's face. "Oh, I'm sorry you had to witness that." "Don't apologize." Her tone was matter-of-fact, not pitying. "I'm the one interrupting your evening, but I have a question, and I'd appreciate it if you'd hear me out before deciding I'm insane." Daniel blinked. "Okay. Would you be willing to sit back down for a moment? I promise I'm not trying to sell you anything or convert you to a religion. I just think we might be able to help each other." Every instinct told Daniel to politely decline and leave. This was bizarre. But there was something in the woman's directness, the lack of drama or manipulation in her voice, that made him hesitate. "5 minutes," he said, sitting back down. The woman pulled out the chair across from him, Rachel's chair, and sat with perfect posture. She folded her hands on the table. "My name is Victoria Lane. I'm the founder of a software company that does data security for financial institutions. I'm 33 years old. I own my apartment. I have no debt, and I cannot have children." Daniel stared at her. "I'm sorry, what?" "Medical condition," Victoria continued, as if listing items on a grocery list. "I found out when I was 25. I've known for 8 years that biological children aren't in my future." She paused, meeting his eyes. "I've also been on 17 first dates in the past 2 years. The moment I mention this fact, the date ends. Sometimes politely, sometimes not. But it always ends." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Recognition, maybe. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I don't want your sympathy," Victoria said. "I want to propose something that's going to sound completely absurd, and I need you to listen to the entire explanation before responding. Can you do that?" "Yes?" Victoria took a breath. "I'm proposing we consider getting married." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Daniel heard his own voice, distant and strange. "I'm sorry, what?" "Hear me out," Victoria said, her tone still calm. "You keep getting rejected because you have a daughter. I keep getting rejected because I can't have children. You're a single father who, based on what I overheard, takes your responsibilities seriously and speaks about your daughter with genuine love. I'm a financially stable woman who has wanted children her entire adult life, but has been told by both biology and the dating pool that it's not going to happen." She leaned forward slightly. "What if we stopped looking for romantic fairy tales and started looking at this practically?" Daniel's mind was reeling. "You're serious?" "Completely. You want to marry me, a stranger." "I want us to consider the possibility," Victoria corrected. "Obviously, we'd need to get to know each other first, date properly, spend time together, meet your daughter, with your permission, of course. But I'm proposing we approach this from a different angle than most people do. Not, are we in love, but could we build a stable, respectful partnership that benefits both of us and provides your daughter with a 2-parent household?" Daniel felt like he'd fallen into an alternate dimension. This is insane. Perhaps, Victoria said. Or perhaps it's the most rational thing either of us has considered in years. She pulled a business card from her pocket and slid it across the table. I'm not asking you to decide tonight. I'm asking you to think about it. If you're interested in having a conversation, just a conversation, call me. If not, throw the card away and forget this happened. She stood, graceful and composed. For what it's worth, she added, your date was an idiot. Any woman who walks away from a man who clearly loves his daughter that much is making a serious mistake. Before Daniel could respond, Victoria walked toward the door, stopped briefly at another table to collect her coat, and disappeared into the December night. Daniel sat in stunned silence, staring at the business card. It was simple, expensive paper stock. Victoria Lane, founder and CEO, Sentinel Data Systems. A phone number, an email address. Nothing else. Around him, Christmas music played. Families laughed. The world continued exactly as it had before, utterly unchanged by what had just happened. Daniel picked up the card, turned it over in his fingers, and slipped it into his wallet. When Daniel got home, Emma was asleep on Mrs. Chen's couch, curled under a blanket printed with cartoon cats. Mrs. Chen looked up from her knitting with hopeful eyes. How was it? She asked softly. Daniel managed a smile. Different than expected. He carried Emma home carefully, trying not to wake her. She stirred as he laid her in bed, blinking up at him sleepily. Did you have fun, Daddy? She mumbled. Daniel pulled her blanket up to her chin, smoothed her hair back from her forehead. Yeah, sweetheart, I did. It wasn't entirely a lie. He'd certainly experienced something. Emma smiled and closed her eyes. Within seconds, she was asleep again. Daniel sat on the edge of her bed for a long moment, watching her breathe. She looked so much like Sarah. Same blonde hair, same small nose, same way of frowning slightly even in sleep. Emma was his entire world. Every decision, every sacrifice, every late night and early morning and moment of bone-deep exhaustion was for her. And he was failing her. Not in the ways that mattered most. She was fed, clothed, loved, safe. But Daniel knew what the parenting book said, what the school counselor gently suggested. Children benefit from two-parent households. Emma needed a mother figure. She needed stability, consistency, someone else to help carry the weight. Daniel had been trying to find that person for 3 years, and failing over and over again. He thought about Victoria Lane, about her direct gray eyes and her utterly insane proposal, about the way she'd talked about marriage like a business partnership, practical and clear-eyed. It was crazy, but was it crazier than being alone forever, than watching Emma grow up without a mother figure, wondering if she blamed herself for his loneliness? Daniel pulled out his wallet and looked at the card again. He should throw it away. This was clearly the behavior of a rational person. Instead, he set it on his nightstand and went to bed. 3 days passed. Daniel went to work, coordinated shipments, answered emails about delayed cargo containers and customs holds. He picked Emma up from school, helped with homework, made dinner. They watched a movie together, then he read her 2 chapters from their current book before bed. Normal life. Routine. But Victoria's card sat on his nightstand like a small white rectangle of possibility. On the 4th night, Emma asked the question. They were sitting at the kitchen table, eating spaghetti. Emma was telling him about art class, how she'd painted a winter scene, and her teacher said it was beautiful. Daniel was listening, smiling, asking questions. Then Emma went quiet. Daddy? She said softly. Yeah, Em. Why don't I have a mommy like the other kids? Daniel's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. They talked about Sarah before, many times. Emma knew her mother had been sick, that she'd died, that it wasn't anyone's fault. But this was different. This wasn't about Sarah. This was about absence. You do have a mommy, Daniel said carefully. She's just not here anymore. I know. Emma twisted her fork in her spaghetti, not eating. But everyone else has a mommy who comes to school and picks them up and goes to parent nights. Why can't I? The ache in Daniel's chest was immediate and sharp. You know why. I know Mommy died. Emma interrupted, and there were tears in her eyes now. But that was a long time ago, and you're so lonely, Daddy. I see you. You think I don't, but I do. A tear slid down her cheek. Is it because of me? Do the ladies not want you because I'm here? Oh, sweetheart, no. Daniel was out of his chair immediately, kneeling beside Emma, pulling her into his arms. No, no, no. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You're not the reason for anything bad, you understand? You're the reason for everything good. Emma cried against his shoulder, and Daniel held her, feeling like his heart was breaking into smaller and smaller pieces. When she finally quieted, Daniel pulled back and looked at her seriously. I need you to listen to me. Are you listening? Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. I love you more than anything in the entire world, Daniel said. More than my job, more than this house, more than my own life. You are my priority, always. And if I haven't found someone special yet, it's not because of you. It's because I haven't found someone who deserves to be part of our family. Someone who would love you as much as I do. Someone worthy of you. But what if you never find her? Emma whispered. Daniel had no answer for that, because he'd been wondering the same thing. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat on his bed and stared at Victoria Lane's business card for 20 minutes straight. Then he picked up his phone and typed a text to the number printed on expensive cardstock. This is Daniel Moore. From the restaurant. Is your offer still open? The response came within 2 minutes. Yes? Coffee tomorrow? There's a place called Ember on 5th Street. 10 a.m.? Daniel hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. Then he typed, I'll be there. Ember Coffee was one of those minimalist places with concrete floors and plants in the windows. Victoria was already seated at a corner table when Daniel arrived, a laptop open in front of her, fingers moving across the keyboard with precise efficiency. She looked up as he approached, closed the laptop, and gestured to the seat across from her. Thank you for coming. Daniel sat, feeling awkward and underdressed in his work khakis and button-down. Victoria wore a crisp white shirt and gray slacks, looking like she'd stepped out of a corporate photo shoot. I ordered you a coffee, Victoria said, pushing a cup toward him. Black, based on what I saw you drinking at the restaurant. If that's wrong, I apologize. It's right, Daniel said, surprised. Thank you. They sat in silence for a moment. Daniel had rehearsed what to say a dozen times on the drive over, but now his mind was blank. Victoria spoke first. I should clarify something before we go further. I'm not looking for romance. I'm not looking for passion or fireworks or whatever people expect from marriage these days. I'm looking for partnership, stability, mutual respect, and shared goals. She paused. Does that disappoint you? Daniel considered the question honestly. I don't know, he admitted. I loved my wife. What we had was, it was everything. I'm not sure I know how to approach marriage any other way. That's fair, Victoria said. I've never been in love, so I can't compare. But I've watched enough relationships fall apart to know that passion fades. Compatibility and shared values don't. She took a sip of her coffee. Tell me about your daughter. The shift in topic caught Daniel off guard. Emma? Yes. How old is she? What's she like? What does she need that you're struggling to provide on your own? Daniel felt defensive instincts rising, then forced them down. Victoria wasn't attacking him. She was asking practical questions. She's 7, he said. Smart, creative, little shy. She loves art and books, and she's terrified of thunderstorms. She asks about her mother sometimes, but less than she used to. He paused. She needs stability. Consistency. She needs to know that the people in her life aren't going to disappear, and she needs, his voice caught slightly, she needs to stop thinking she's the reason I'm alone. Victoria's expression softened, just slightly. She thinks that? She asked me 3 nights ago if women don't want me because of her. That's why you texted. Yes. Victoria nodded slowly. Okay. Here's what I propose. We spend time together, real time, getting to know each other. We're honest about everything, our expectations, our boundaries, our deal breakers. If at any point either of us decides this won't work, we walk away, no hard feelings. But if we both think there's potential, she met his eyes. We move forward, carefully, thoughtfully, but forward. "And Emma?" Daniel asked. "I'd like to meet her," Victoria said. "Obviously, when you're comfortable with that. I'm not going to pretend I have experience with children, but I can learn. And I can promise I'll never treat her like a burden or an inconvenience." Daniel studied Victoria's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. He found only directness and a kind of careful hope. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's try." Victoria extended her hand across the table. "Partners?" Daniel shook it. Her grip was firm, confident. "Partners." Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel and Victoria met 6 times. They had dinner at a quiet Thai restaurant and talked about their childhoods. Victoria had grown up wealthy, the only daughter of a corporate lawyer and a former model. She'd been expected to marry well and produce grandchildren. When she'd chosen to start her own company instead, the disappointment had been palpable. When she'd revealed her infertility, the disappointment had turned to something colder. Daniel told her about growing up middle class in Ohio, about meeting Sarah in college, about how they'd planned to have 3 kids and grow old together, about how cancer had destroyed those plans in 18 brutal months. They met for lunch and discussed logistics. Victoria explained her work schedule. She typically put in 60-hour weeks but had flexibility. Daniel described his routine with Emma: school pickup at 3:30, dinner by 6, bedtime at 8. They talked about housework, cooking, financial arrangements. It felt more like a business negotiation than dating, but somehow that made it easier. They went to a museum and discovered they had similar taste in art. Both preferred Impressionism to Modernism. Both found abstract expressionism pretentious. They had coffee and argued good-naturedly about politics. Victoria was more libertarian, Daniel more progressive, but they found common ground on education and healthcare. Daniel learned that Victoria was fiercely intelligent, occasionally blunt to the point of rudeness, and fundamentally kind beneath the directness. She remembered details, asked thoughtful questions, and never once made him feel inadequate about his job or income level. Victoria learned that Daniel was patient, thoughtful, and carried his grief quietly. He never talked about Sarah unless asked, but the love was still there, present in small ways. He worried constantly about Emma. He read voraciously. He had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable. On their 7th meeting, Daniel brought Emma. He'd prepared her carefully. "I've met someone," he'd said, "a woman named Victoria. She's my friend and she'd like to meet you. Is that okay?" Emma had studied him seriously. "Is she nice?" "I think so, but you can decide for yourself." They met at a park on a Saturday afternoon. Victoria arrived exactly on time carrying a small gift bag. Emma hid behind Daniel's leg as Victoria approached. "Hi, Emma," Victoria said, crouching down to eye level. "Your dad has told me a lot about you. I brought you something, but only if you want it. No pressure." Emma peeked out curiously. "What is it?" Victoria pulled out a sketchbook and a set of colored pencils. "Your dad mentioned you like art. I thought maybe you'd like these, but if you already have enough art supplies, I can return them." Emma's eyes went wide. "Those are the good kind," she whispered. "The fancy ones." "They are," Victoria agreed. "I figured if you're going to create something, might as well use quality materials." Emma looked up at Daniel, who nodded. She stepped forward and carefully took the gift. "Thank you," she said softly. "You're welcome." Victoria stood and gestured toward the playground. "Want to show me what you can do on those swings?" Emma considered this, then nodded. She ran ahead, and Victoria followed at a walking pace. Daniel watched his daughter and this strange, direct woman who'd walked into his life on Christmas night. Emma was laughing now, pumping her legs on the swing, calling for Victoria to watch how high she could go. Victoria stood nearby, hands in her pockets, offering genuine encouragement without the false enthusiasm some adults used with children. They spent 2 hours at the park. Emma showed Victoria her favorite climbing structure, the tree where she liked to read, the bench where she and Daniel sometimes had ice cream. Victoria asked questions, listened to answers, treated Emma like a person rather than a child to be managed. When it was time to go, Emma hugged Victoria goodbye. That night, tucked into bed, Emma asked, "Is Miss Victoria going to be around more?" Daniel sat on the edge of her bed. "Maybe. Would that be okay?" Emma was quiet for a moment. "She's different than the other ladies." "How so?" "She doesn't try too hard," Emma said thoughtfully. She's just herself. I like that. Daniel kissed her forehead. Me too, sweetheart. What? Over the following weeks, Victoria became a regular presence in their lives. She came to dinner twice a week. She attended Emma's school art show and genuinely admired the paintings. She taught Emma basic coding using a kids' programming app, and Daniel watched his daughter's face light up with the joy of creating something from nothing. Victoria wasn't perfect. She sometimes forgot that children needed simpler explanations. She was terrible at pretending to lose at board games. She had no instinct for kid-appropriate movies and once suggested they watch a documentary about financial fraud. But she was consistent. She showed up when she said she would. She kept her promises. She listened when Emma talked about her day, really listened, asking follow-up questions that showed she remembered previous conversations. And slowly, carefully, Daniel felt something shifting in his chest. Not love, not yet, but possibility. One evening, after Emma was asleep, Daniel and Victoria sat on the couch with glasses of wine. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said. "Always." "Why me? Really? You could have anyone. You're successful, intelligent, beautiful. Why a broke single dad you met in a restaurant?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Because you're genuine," she said finally. "Because when you talk about Emma, I see real love, not performance. Because you don't want anything from me except partnership." She turned to look at him. "Everyone I've dated wants the successful CEO or the society connection or the money. You just want someone who will love your daughter and show up consistently. That's refreshing." "I'm not that noble," Daniel said. "I'm terrified of being alone, of failing Emma, of being human?" Victoria interrupted gently. "Daniel, I'm not looking for a saint. I'm looking for someone real, someone who shows up, someone who can build something sustainable." She paused. "Are you happy with how this is going?" Daniel considered the question. Was he happy? He wasn't sure, but he was less lonely, less afraid. Emma was smiling more, and Victoria felt like solid ground after years of uncertainty. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." Victoria nodded. "Good. So am I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the streetlights through the window. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to small revolutions happening in quiet living rooms. But inside, something new was building. Careful, practical, and just maybe strong enough to last. 3 months into their careful arrangement, Victoria invited Daniel and Emma to dinner at her apartment. Daniel had never seen where Victoria lived. Their time together had been spent at his modest 2-bedroom rental, at parks, at restaurants. Victoria had never suggested bringing them to her place, and Daniel hadn't pushed. But when she'd called on Thursday evening, her voice had carried a note of something he couldn't quite identify. Nervousness, maybe, or determination. "I'd like you both to come over Saturday," she'd said. 6 o'clock. I'll cook." "You cook?" Daniel had asked, genuinely surprised. In all their dinners together, Victoria had never mentioned cooking. "I'm learning," Victoria had replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Fair warning, it might be terrible, but I want to try." Now Daniel stood in the lobby of Victoria's building, Emma's hand in his, staring at the gleaming marble floors and the doorman in his crisp uniform. The address Victoria had given him was in the historic district downtown, the kind of building with a name instead of just a number. "May I help you?" the doorman asked politely. "We're here to see Victoria Lane," Daniel said, feeling acutely aware of his department store slacks and Emma's scuffed sneakers. The doorman's face brightened immediately. "Ah, yes. Ms. Lane mentioned you'd be arriving. Please take the elevator to the 12th floor. Her unit is 12C. The elevator was mirrored and silent, rising so smoothly Daniel barely felt the movement. Emma pressed herself against his side, eyes wide as she took in their reflections multiplied endlessly around them. "Daddy," she whispered, "is Miss Victoria rich?" Daniel had known Victoria was successful, the company, the car, the expensive coffee habits, but he'd somehow managed not to think too hard about what that meant. "I think she does pretty well," he said carefully. The elevator doors opened onto a hallway with only 4 doors, each spaced far apart. Soft lighting, artwork on the walls, the kind of quiet that came from serious money and serious insulation. Victoria opened the door before Daniel could knock. She wore jeans and a simple black sweater, her hair down around her shoulders instead of pulled back. She looked younger like this, softer. "You're exactly on time," she said, stepping back to let them in. "I appreciate that." Daniel stepped into the apartment and tried very hard to keep his expression neutral. The space was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, exposed brick walls, sleek modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The kitchen was open to the living area, all stainless steel and marble countertops. Abstract paintings hung on the walls, real ones, not prints. Emma's hand tightened in Daniel's. He squeezed back reassuringly. "I know it's a lot," Victoria said, closing the door behind them. "I inherited some money when my grandmother died, and I invested it well. The company provides the rest." She knelt down to Emma's level. "Hey, Em, I set up something in the other room for you while dinner finishes cooking. Want to see?" Emma looked up at Daniel, who nodded. She followed Victoria through an archway into what appeared to be a library or office. Daniel heard his daughter gasp. He walked over and found Emma standing in the center of the room, slowly turning in a circle. Victoria had set up an entire art station, a proper easel, canvases in various sizes, paint sets, brushes, a smock. On the desk was the sketchbook Victoria had given Emma months ago, now filled with drawings, next to a new, larger one. "This is all for me?" Emma breathed. "If you want it," Victoria said. "I thought maybe you'd like a space here to create when you visit, but only if you're comfortable with that." Emma threw her arms around Victoria's waist so suddenly that Victoria actually stumbled backward a step. Daniel watched something flash across Victoria's face. Surprise, then pleasure, then a kind of careful tenderness. "Thank you," Emma said, muffled against Victoria's sweater. Victoria's hand came up hesitantly, then settled on Emma's hair. "You're welcome, sweetheart." The word, sweetheart, hit Daniel unexpectedly hard. Victoria had never used an endearment with Emma before. Everything had been carefully measured, appropriate, boundaried. This was different. Emma pulled back, already moving toward the art supplies. "Can I paint now?" "After dinner," Victoria said. "But we can come back here afterward, I promise." They ate at Victoria's dining table, which seated 8, but was set for 3 at one end. Victoria had made lasagna, slightly burned at the edges, but edible, with salad and garlic bread. Emma chattered happily about school, about her art teacher's praise for her latest project, about the book she and Daniel were reading together. Victoria listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed she remembered details from previous conversations. She knew the names of Emma's classmates, understood the ongoing drama about who got to sit where at lunch, remembered that Emma's art teacher was named Mrs. Kowalski. Daniel watched them together and felt something settling in his chest. This was working. Against all logic and reasonable expectation, this strange arrangement was actually working. After dinner, Emma went back to the art room with Victoria's permission. Daniel helped clear the table, standing beside Victoria at the sink as she rinsed plates and he loaded the dishwasher. "You set up that whole room for her," Daniel said quietly. "Yes. That's not a small thing, Victoria." She was quiet for a moment, hands stilling in the soapy water. "I know this started as a practical arrangement," she said finally. "But Emma's not a business proposition, Daniel. She's a person, a wonderful person. And if we're going to do this, really do this, then she deserves to have a space here that's hers." "We haven't talked about what really doing this means," Daniel said carefully. Victoria turned to face him, leaning back against the counter. "No, we haven't." She dried her hands on a towel, taking her time. "What do you think it means?" Daniel set down the plate he was holding. "I think it means I need to be honest with you about something." "Okay." "I didn't think I could feel anything for anyone after Sarah," he said. "I thought that part of me was done. But Victoria, when I'm with you, I don't feel lonely anymore. When I watch you with Emma, I don't just see someone being kind to my daughter. I see someone who actually cares about her, who wants to be part of her life." Victoria's expression was carefully neutral. "And I think I'm falling for you," Daniel said. The words came out rougher than he'd intended. "I know that wasn't the deal. I know we said this was about partnership and stability and practical concerns, but I can't keep pretending that's all it is for me." Victoria was very still. Daniel couldn't read her face, couldn't tell if he'd just ruined everything. Then she stepped forward and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, nothing like the passionate kisses from movies or romance novels. It felt like a question more than a declaration. Daniel responded carefully, one hand coming up to cup her face. When she pulled back, Victoria's eyes were bright. "I don't know if what I feel is love," she said quietly. "I don't have Sarah to compare it to. I don't know what that kind of love feels like. But I know I think about you all the time. I know I look forward to seeing Emma more than I look forward to most business meetings. I know that when I picture my future now, you're both in it." She paused. "Is that enough?" "Yeah," Daniel said, his voice rough. "That's enough." They stood there for a moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. From the other room, Emma called out, "Miss Victoria, can you help me mix colors?" Victoria smiled against Daniel's lips, then pulled back. "Duty calls." Daniel watched her go, watched her settle onto the floor beside Emma without concern for her expensive jeans, watched her seriously discuss the difference between cobalt and cerulean blue. And he thought, for the first time in 3 years, that maybe everything was going to be okay. 2 weeks later, Victoria brought up the subject of meeting her parents. They were at Daniel's place. Victoria had started spending more time there, claiming she liked the coziness better than her own apartment's sterile perfection. Emma was asleep and they were curled together on the couch, Victoria's laptop open as she responded to late-night emails. "My parents are having a dinner party next Saturday," Victoria said, not looking up from her screen. "They've asked me to bring a guest." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. "They don't know about me." "They know I'm seeing someone," Victoria said carefully. "They don't know about Emma." "Victoria." She closed the laptop and turned to face him. "I know. I should have told them. But my parents are complicated. My mother has very specific ideas about what my life should look like. My father mostly agrees with whatever makes her happy." She paused. "I wanted to be sure about us before I brought you into that world." "And now you're sure?" "I'm sure I want them to meet you," Victoria said. "I'm sure I want to move forward with this. But Daniel, I need you to understand what you're walking into. My parents live in a different world than we do. They value appearances, connections, wealth. They're going to judge you. They're going to judge Emma." Daniel felt defensive anger rising. "Then why should we meet them?" "Because they're my parents," Victoria said simply. "Because despite everything, I love them. And because if we're going to get married, they need to accept that you and Emma are part of my life now." The word married hung in the air between them. "Is that what we're doing?" Daniel asked quietly. "Getting married?" Victoria took his hand. "I'd like to. Eventually. If you want that too." Daniel thought about Sarah, about the proposal he'd planned for months, the ring he'd saved for, the romantic restaurant overlooking the lake. He thought about how love was supposed to look, feel, unfold. This wasn't that, but it was real, solid, built on honesty and choice rather than passion and accident. "I want that," he said. Victoria squeezed his hand. "Then come to dinner. Meet my parents. Let's see if we can make them understand." The dinner party was at Victoria's childhood home, a sprawling estate 40 minutes outside the city. Daniel drove his 10-year-old Honda up a circular driveway lined with luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, a Bentley. Emma sat in the back seat, wearing her nicest dress, the blue one with white flowers that she'd worn to her school's spring concert. She'd been quiet on the drive, sensing Daniel's tension. "Remember what we talked about," Daniel said, turning to look at her. "Be yourself, be polite, but you don't have to try to impress anyone, okay?" Emma nodded, but her eyes were wide with nervousness. Victoria met them at the door. She wore a black cocktail dress and heels, pearls at her throat. She looked like she belonged in this world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. "You look beautiful," Daniel said. "You look terrified," Victoria replied, then softened. "It's going to be fine, I promise." The house was full of people. 40 or 50 guests in formal attire, holding wine glasses, speaking in the modulated tones of the very wealthy. Servers moved through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Classical music played softly in the background. Daniel felt immediately, painfully out of place in his department store suit. Emma pressed against his side, and he put a protective arm around her shoulders. Victoria led them through the crowd to where an older couple stood near the fireplace. The woman was tall and elegant, her silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a burgundy dress that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. The man beside her was distinguished, gray at the temples, holding himself with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. "Mother, father," Victoria said, "I'd like you to meet Daniel Moore and his daughter Emma." Victoria's mother, Constance, Daniel remembered, looked at him with sharp, assessing eyes. Then her gaze dropped to Emma, and something cold flickered across her face. "Daniel?" she said, extending a hand without warmth. "How nice to finally meet you." Daniel shook her hand. "Thank you for having us, Mrs. Lane." "And this must be Emma," Constance said, looking down at the little girl with an expression that might have been a smile but felt more like evaluation. "What a pretty dress." Emma mumbled a thank you, shrinking closer to Daniel. Victoria's father shook Daniel's hand with a firmer grip. "Robert Lane, Victoria tells us you work in logistics?" "Yes, sir. I coordinate shipments for Meridian Transport." "Interesting." Robert's tone suggested it was anything but. "And Emma, you're in second grade?" "Yes, sir," Emma whispered. The conversation continued in that vein, polite questions with sharp edges, assessing looks, the kind of subtle dismissal that people with real money had perfected over generations. Victoria tried to steer things towards safer topics, but her parents kept circling back, probing, measuring, finding Daniel and Emma wanting without ever saying so directly. After 15 excruciating minutes, Victoria excused them to get drinks. "I'm sorry," she said quietly as they walked toward the bar. "They're worse than I expected." "It's fine," Daniel lied. "It's not fine." Victoria's jaw was tight. "They're being condescending and classist and—" "Miss Victoria?" Emma's small voice interrupted. "Can I go to the bathroom?" "Of course, sweetheart. It's just down that hallway, second door on the right." Emma scurried away, and Daniel watched her go with a mixture of love and guilt. She shouldn't have to endure this. Neither of them should. "Daniel," Victoria started, but he shook his head. "Let's just get through tonight." Dinner was served in a formal dining room with a table that seated 20. Daniel found himself between a retired investment banker and a woman who owned a gallery, both of whom clearly had no interest in talking to him. Emma sat across from him, next to Victoria, picking at her food with quiet misery. Halfway through the main course, Constance addressed the table at large. "Victoria tells us she's quite serious about this relationship," she said, her voice carrying easily through the room. "It's wonderful to see her finally settling down. Of course, we'd always hoped she might find someone from a similar background, someone who understands the demands of our social circle. But love does what it will, doesn't it?" The table laughed politely. Daniel felt his face burn. Victoria's hand clenched around her fork. "Mother." "And the little girl is just precious," Constance continued, smiling at Emma in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Such a responsibility, taking on someone else's child. But I'm sure Victoria is up for the challenge." The words were kind. The tone was poison. Emma's face crumpled. Daniel saw it happen, saw his daughter's composure break, saw tears fill her eyes. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse us," he said, his voice tight. "Emma and I need some air." He didn't wait for permission. He walked around the table, took Emma's hand, and led her toward the front door. Behind him, he heard Victoria's chair scrape back. "Daniel, wait." "Don't," he said, not turning around. "Just don't." He kept walking. Outside, the evening air was cool and clean. Daniel led Emma to his car, opened the back door, and helped her inside. She was crying now, really crying, tears streaming down her face. "I ruined it," she sobbed. "I ruined everything. They don't want me there. They don't want you with Miss Victoria because of me." "Oh, baby, no." Daniel climbed into the back seat and pulled Emma onto his lap, holding her tight. "This isn't your fault." "None of this is your fault." "But they said—" "They're wrong," Daniel said fiercely. "They're wrong, Emma. You are not a burden. You are not a challenge. You are the best thing in my entire life, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to be part of our family." Emma cried against his shoulder, and Daniel held her, his own eyes burning. The car door opened. Victoria stood there, still in her cocktail dress, mascara smudged under her eyes. "Can I get in?" she asked quietly. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Victoria climbed into the back seat, closing the door behind her. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Victoria said, "I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault either," Daniel said, though his voice was hollow. "It is, though." Victoria's voice was thick. "I knew what they were like. I knew they'd judge you. I thought I could manage it, control it. I thought they'd at least pretend to be decent." She reached out tentatively and touched Emma's back. "Emma, sweetheart, will you look at me?" Emma turned slightly, her face blotchy and tear-stained. "What my mother said was cruel and wrong," Victoria said clearly. "You are not a responsibility or a challenge. You're a gift. You're smart and creative and kind, and anyone would be lucky to have you in their life. I'm lucky to have you in my life." "But they don't think so," Emma whispered. "No," Victoria agreed. "They don't, and that's their failure, not yours." Emma studied Victoria's face. "Do you really mean that?" "Yes," Victoria said. "I really do." Emma was quiet for a long moment, then she reached out and took Victoria's hand. "Okay." Victoria's breath caught. She squeezed Emma's hand gently. Daniel watched them, feeling something break apart inside his chest. He'd been so focused on protecting Emma, on avoiding more rejection, that he'd missed something crucial. Victoria wasn't like the others. She wasn't going to walk away. But Daniel was going to walk away from her, because Emma deserved better than this. She deserved better than cold judgment and subtle cruelty. She deserved a life where she wasn't made to feel unwanted, where she didn't have to hear herself described as a responsibility or a challenge. And if being with Victoria meant subjecting Emma to this world, to these people, then Daniel couldn't do it. He had to choose his daughter. He always had to choose his daughter. "I think we should go home," Daniel said quietly. Victoria looked at him, and he saw understanding dawn in her eyes, understanding and something that looked like devastation. "Daniel," she started. "Thank you for dinner," he said, his voice flat. "We should go." "Please don't do this," Victoria said. "Don't what? Don't let them win." "This isn't about winning," Daniel said. "This is about Emma. This is about protecting her from people who will always see her as less than." "So you're protecting her by taking away someone who loves her?" Victoria's voice broke. "I love her, Daniel. I love both of you." The words hung in the air between them. Daniel felt his resolve waver, then firm again. Love wasn't enough. Love didn't protect Emma from judgment and exclusion. Love didn't change who Victoria's parents were, what world she came from. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I can't do this." He helped Emma out of the car, into her booster seat. She was quiet now, exhausted from crying. Victoria stood on the driveway watching them. The porch light caught on her tears. "I'm not giving up," she called as Daniel climbed into the driver's seat. "I'm not going to let you push me away because you're scared." Daniel started the engine. "Goodbye, Victoria." He drove away without looking back. In the rearview mirror, he saw her standing there, alone in her expensive dress, growing smaller and smaller until she disappeared. Emma fell asleep on the drive home, her face still streaked with tears. Daniel carried her inside, tucked her into bed without waking her. He sat in her room for a long time, watching her sleep, feeling like his heart was being crushed in a vice. He'd done the right thing. He'd protected his daughter, so why did it feel like the worst mistake of his life? His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Please reconsider, please." Daniel turned off his phone and went to bed. He didn't sleep at all. The apartment felt suffocating in the days that followed. Daniel went through the motions, making breakfast, dropping Emma at school, going to work, picking her up, making dinner. But everything felt hollow, like he was moving through water, every action requiring enormous effort. Emma was quieter than usual. She didn't ask about Victoria, but Daniel caught her staring at the art supplies Victoria had given her, at the sketchbook filled with drawings they'd worked on together. Once he found her sitting on her bed, holding her phone, not Daniel's old hand-me-down, but the simple tablet Victoria had given her for educational games, with tears streaming down her face. "Em?" Daniel had said softly from the doorway. Emma had looked up, quickly wiping her eyes. "I miss her, Daddy." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. "I know, sweetheart." Why can't we see her anymore? Daniel sat beside her on the bed, searching for words that would make sense to a 7-year-old. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices to keep the people they love safe. But Miss Victoria never hurt us, Emma said, her voice small and confused. She was nice. She listened to me. She taught me about computers and art, and she always remembered what I told her. Fresh tears spilled over. Didn't she want us anymore? No, baby, it's not that. Then why? Emma's voice rose, edging toward hysteria. Why did we leave? Why can't I see her? What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong, Daniel said desperately, pulling Emma into his arms. This isn't about you. But Emma was sobbing now, really sobbing, in a way Daniel hadn't seen since the early days after Sarah died. Everyone leaves, she cried. Mommy left, and now Miss Victoria left, and it's because of me. I know it is. I heard what that lady said. I'm a responsibility. I'm a challenge. I make everything too hard. Stop, Daniel said, his own voice breaking. Emma, stop. That's not true. But Emma couldn't stop. She cried until she made herself sick, until Daniel had to carry her to the bathroom and hold her hair back while she threw up. He cleaned her face with a cool washcloth, gave her water, carried her back to bed. He lay beside her, holding her until she finally cried herself to sleep, exhausted and heartbroken. Daniel stared at the ceiling, his daughter's words echoing in his head. Everyone leaves. It's because of me. He'd thought he was protecting her. He'd thought removing them from Victoria's world, from her parents' judgment, was the right thing to do. But what if he'd been wrong? What if, in trying to shield Emma from rejection, he'd caused her worse pain? What if he'd taken away the one person besides himself who'd made Emma feel truly seen and valued? His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He'd been ignoring Victoria's texts for 3 days now, letting them pile up unread. But something made him reach for it this time. The message was short. I told my parents they're not welcome in my life until they can treat you and Emma with respect. I meant what I said, Daniel. I'm not giving up on you, on us. Daniel stared at the words for a long time. Then he carefully extracted himself from Emma's bed and went to the living room. He sat in the dark, phone in his hands, and finally opened all the messages he'd been avoiding. There were dozens. Some were short, please call me. I'm sorry. I miss you both. Others were longer, paragraphs of explanation and apology and determination. Victoria had called her parents out, had apparently had a confrontation with them that ended with her leaving their house and refusing further contact until they changed their attitudes. She'd sent articles about blended families, about navigating class differences, about standing up to family pressure. She'd even sent a picture of the art room in her apartment, still set up and waiting for Emma. The last message had come just an hour ago. I know you're trying to protect Emma. I understand that instinct. But Daniel, you're teaching her that love means running when things get hard. You're teaching her that she's not worth fighting for. Is that really the lesson you want her to learn? The words hit Daniel like a sledgehammer. He thought about Sarah, about how she'd fought every single day of her illness. She hadn't given up even when the pain was unbearable, even when the doctors said there was no hope. She'd fought because she wanted every possible moment with Emma, with him. And at the end, when she knew she was dying, she'd made Daniel promise something. Don't let fear win, she'd whispered, her hand weak in his. Don't let it make you small. Emma needs you to be brave. Promise me. He'd promised. And then 3 years later, he'd let fear dictate everything. Daniel looked at his phone, at Victoria's messages, at the evidence of someone who was willing to fight for them, even when he wouldn't fight for himself. He typed slowly. Can we talk? The response came within seconds. Yes. When? Tomorrow? After I drop Emma at school? I'll be there. Your place or mine? Daniel hesitated. His place felt safer, more controlled. But maybe that was exactly the problem. Maybe he needed to step into vulnerability instead of hiding from it. Yours, he typed. Okay. 9 a.m.? I'll be there. Daniel set down his phone and put his head in his hands. He'd made so many mistakes. He'd let his fear hurt the two people who mattered most. But maybe, it wasn't too late to fix it. The next morning, Daniel dropped Emma at school with an extra long hug. She looked at him curiously. You okay, Daddy? Getting there, sweetheart, he said. I love you. You know that, right? I know. Emma hugged him back fiercely. I love you too. Daniel drove to Victoria's building with his hands shaking on the steering wheel. The doorman recognized him and waved him through without question. The elevator ride felt both too long and too short. Victoria opened the door before he could knock. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt. Daniel had never seen her look less polished. Somehow, that made this easier. Hi, she said quietly. Hi. They stood there for a moment, the space between them full of everything unsaid. Come in, Victoria finally said, stepping back. Daniel followed her inside. The apartment looked the same, still sleek and expensive and utterly unlike his own cluttered rental. But somehow it felt different now. Less like a showroom, more like a place where someone actually lived. Victoria led him to the couch and sat, leaving space between them. Thank you for coming. Thank you for not giving up, Daniel said. The words felt inadequate. I meant what I said in my messages, Victoria said. I told my parents they're not part of my life until they can treat you and Emma with basic human decency. My mother called me dramatic. My father suggested I was throwing away my future. I told them my future is my choice, and I choose you. If they can't accept that, then they've chosen not to be part of my life. Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. Victoria, you can't just cut off your family. Why not? Victoria's voice was sharp. They were willing to make you and Emma feel unwelcome in my life. They were willing to hurt a 7-year-old child to make a point about social status. What kind of people do that? She took a shaky breath. I've spent my whole life trying to meet their expectations. I built a successful company. I made all the right connections. I said all the right things. And it was never enough. I was never enough. Because I couldn't give them the one thing they really wanted, a biological grandchild to carry on the family name. She stood and walked to the window, arms crossed over her chest. Do you know what my mother said when I told her about my infertility? She said it was a shame because it meant I'd have to settle for adoption, and adopted children never really feel like family. Daniel felt anger surge through him. That's horrible. That's who they are, Victoria said flatly. And I'm done pretending it's acceptable. I'm done making excuses for them. I'm done sacrificing my happiness to maintain appearances. She turned to face him. But I need to know, Daniel, are you done too? Are you done running from this because you're afraid? The words stung because they were true. Yes, Daniel said. I'm done running. But Victoria, I need you to understand why I did it. I do understand. No, let me finish. Daniel stood and walked over to her. When Emma's mother died, I made a promise to myself that I would never let anything hurt her again. I know that's impossible. I know life doesn't work that way, but it's what I told myself. And every time someone rejected me because of her, it felt like proof that I was failing, that she was suffering because of my choices. His voice caught. When your mother talked about Emma like she was a burden, when I saw Emma's face crumple, all I could think was that I'd done it again. I'd put her in a situation where she was made to feel less than, and I couldn't let that keep happening. So you took away someone who loves her, Victoria said softly. Someone who thinks she's brilliant and talented and absolutely worth fighting for. I know. Daniel's eyes were burning. I know I messed up. Emma's been a wreck. She thinks everyone leaves her. She thinks she's the reason people go away. And that's on me. I taught her that by walking away from you. Victoria stepped closer. Daniel, I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you explicitly tell me you don't want this, that you don't want me. But if you're pushing me away because you're scared, because you think you're protecting Emma, that's not protection. That's abandonment. The word hit Daniel like a punch. I never wanted to abandon you. Then don't, Victoria said simply. Stay. Fight. Choose us the way I'm choosing you. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman who'd approached him on the worst night of the year with an absurd proposal, who'd spent months getting to know Emma, learning how to be part of their lives, who'd set up an art room in her expensive apartment because she wanted his daughter to feel welcome, who'd cut off her own parents rather than accept their judgment of his child. I'm terrified, he admitted. I'm terrified that I'm not enough for you. that Emma and I will drag you down, that you'll wake up one day and realize you made a mistake.
Do you think I'm not terrified too? Victoria's laugh was shaky. Daniel, I've never done this before. I've never been in love. I've never had to navigate someone else's needs or feelings. I've never had to be a parent. I'm probably going to mess up constantly. I'm going to say the wrong thing or forget important details or handle situations badly. She took his hands. But I want to try. I want to learn. I want to be part of your family, Emma's family, if you'll let me. Daniel's defenses were crumbling, all the walls he'd built to protect himself falling away. What if your parents never come around? Then they don't, Victoria said. I've made my choice, Daniel. The question is, have you made yours? Daniel thought about Emma, crying herself sick because she thought she'd driven away another person she loved. He thought about Sarah's deathbed promise. Don't let fear win. Be brave. He thought about standing in that restaurant on Christmas night, rejected and alone, certain he'd never find anyone willing to accept his life as it was. And he thought about Victoria, who'd seen him at his lowest and offered not pity but partnership, who'd proven over and over that she meant what she said, who was standing in front of him now, terrified and determined and willing to fight for something she believed in. I choose you, Daniel said. I choose us, and I'm sorry I let fear make me forget that. Victoria's expression broke into something between a laugh and a sob. She closed the distance between them and kissed him, hard and desperate, and full of relief. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying. I need to talk to Emma, Daniel said. I need to apologize to her. I need to explain. We'll do it together, Victoria said, if that's okay with you. Daniel nodded. Yeah, together. They sat back down on the couch, this time with no space between them. Victoria's head rested on Daniel's shoulder. His arm was around her waist. My parents might never accept this, Victoria said quietly. They might never accept Emma. Are you prepared for that? Are you? Daniel countered. I've already made my peace with it, Victoria said. I'd rather have you and Emma than their approval. Daniel kissed the top of her head. Then we'll deal with it, together. They sat in silence for a while, just breathing together, letting the fear and hurt of the past few days slowly drain away. Finally, Victoria said, I have a meeting at 11, but tonight, can I come over? Can we talk to Emma together? Yes, Daniel said. Please. That evening, Daniel sat Emma down on the couch, and Victoria sat beside him. Emma looked between them, confusion and hope warring on her face. Is Miss Victoria coming back? She asked, her voice small. If that's okay with you, Victoria said. But first, your dad and I need to apologize to you. Emma's brow furrowed. Why? Daniel took a deep breath. Because I made a mistake, sweetheart. When we left that dinner party, I was trying to protect you from people who were mean, but what I actually did was take away someone who loves you very much, someone who wants to be part of our family. I messed up too, Victoria added. I should have prepared you better for what my parents are like. I should have protected you from them. I'm so sorry they made you feel unwanted, Emma, because you're not. You're so very wanted. Emma's eyes were shining with tears. Really? Really, Victoria said firmly. You're smart and creative and kind and I feel lucky every single day that I get to know you. Emma looked at Daniel. You're not mad at Miss Victoria? No, baby, I'm not mad. I was scared and I made a bad decision, but I'm not scared anymore. He paused. How would you feel if Miss Victoria was around more? If she was part of our family permanently? Emma's face transformed. The hope that had been tentative, cautious, suddenly blazed into full joy. Like she'd be my mom? Daniel glanced at Victoria, who looked like she was barely holding back tears. If that's something you want, Victoria said carefully. I know I can't replace your real mom. I would never try to, but I could be someone else who loves you and takes care of you and is there for you, if you're okay with that. Emma launched herself off the couch and into Victoria's arms so hard that Victoria actually fell backward against the cushions. Emma was crying and laughing at the same time, her arms wrapped tight around Victoria's neck. I want that, Emma said through her tears. I want that so much. Victoria held her close, one hand stroking Emma's hair, tears streaming down her own face.
She looked at Daniel over Emma's shoulder, and he saw everything he needed to see in her eyes: love, commitment, determination, hope. They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them tangled together on the couch. Emma eventually calmed down enough to pull back and wipe her eyes. "Can I ask you something?" she said to Victoria. "Anything." "What should I call you? I don't want to call you Mom because that was my real mommy's name. But Miss Victoria feels weird if you're going to be part of our family." Victoria thought for a moment. "What feels right to you?" Emma considered this seriously. "Maybe just Victoria? Is that okay?" "That's perfect," Victoria said, smiling. "Whatever feels comfortable to you." Emma nodded, satisfied. Then her face clouded slightly. "What about your parents? The mean people at the dinner?" Victoria's jaw tightened. "My parents need to learn some important lessons about kindness and respect. Until they do, they're not going to be part of our lives." "But they're your family," Emma said, confused. "Family is more than biology," Victoria said gently. "Real family is the people who love you and treat you with respect and show up for you when things are hard. My parents failed at that. But you and your dad, you're my real family now, the one I'm choosing." Emma nodded slowly, processing this. Then she said, "If they learn to be nice, can they come back?" Victoria smiled. "If they learn to be nice, we'll see." That seemed to satisfy Emma. She snuggled back between Daniel and Victoria, reaching for both their hands. "I'm glad you came back," she said to Victoria. "I'm glad I came back too," Victoria said. "And Emma? I'm never leaving again, no matter what happens, no matter how hard things get. I'm here, I promise." Emma squeezed her hand. "Promise, promise?" "Promise, promise," Victoria said solemnly. Daniel watched his daughter's face relax into contentment, watched Victoria hold Emma's hand like it was the most precious thing in the world, and he felt something he hadn't felt in years: real, solid hope for the future. Later that night, after Emma had finally gone to bed, after they'd read her 3 extra chapters because she kept asking for just one more, Daniel and Victoria stood in the kitchen making tea. "That was harder than I expected," Victoria admitted. "Seeing her so happy, knowing I almost lost that because of my parents' prejudice." "You didn't lose it," Daniel said. "I almost threw it away, but you fought for us." "We fought for us," Victoria corrected. "You came back too." Daniel pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I should have said it before. I love you." Victoria's breath caught. "I love you too. Both of you." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, while outside the city lights twinkled and somewhere in the apartment, Emma slept peacefully for the first time in days. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead: Victoria's parents, the logistics of blending their lives, learning to navigate parenthood together. But for the first time since that Christmas night 4 months ago, Daniel believed they could handle it. They'd chosen each other, and that choice, made over and over every single day, was strong enough to build a future on. The weeks that followed felt like learning to breathe again. Victoria started staying over 3 nights a week, then 4. Then it seemed easier to just acknowledge that she lived there more than she lived in her own apartment. Emma's face lit up every time Victoria walked through the door. Daniel found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't in years, the constant tension of doing everything alone slowly unwinding. They developed routines. Victoria handled breakfast while Daniel got Emma ready for school. Daniel cooked dinner while Victoria helped Emma with homework. They took turns reading bedtime stories, with Emma often falling asleep between them, one hand holding Daniel's, the other clutching Victoria's. It wasn't always smooth. Victoria still sometimes forgot that 7-year-olds needed simpler explanations, launching into technical descriptions that left Emma confused. Daniel still occasionally treated Victoria like a guest rather than a partner, apologizing too much for normal household chaos. Emma sometimes tested boundaries, playing them against each other to see if they'd hold firm together. But they were learning, and more importantly, they were happy. 6 weeks after their reconciliation, Victoria brought up marriage again. They were sitting on the back porch of Daniel's rental house, barely more than a concrete slab with 2 folding chairs, but it caught the evening sun perfectly. Emma was inside watching a movie, and they could hear her laughing at something on screen. "I've been thinking," Victoria said, swirling the wine in her glass, "about making this official." Daniel's heart rate picked up. Official how? Marriage, Victoria said simply. Not right away. I'm not proposing this second, but soon. Maybe this fall? She turned to look at him.
What do you think? Daniel thought about Sarah, about the wedding they'd planned together, the traditional ceremony with bridesmaids and groomsmen and a reception hall full of people. He thought about how different this was, how much his life had changed. I think, he said slowly, that I'd like that very much. But there's something we need to deal with first. Victoria's expression grew guarded. My parents. Your parents, Daniel confirmed. Victoria, I meant what I said. I'm not going to let their opinion dictate our lives. But if we're getting married, if we're really doing this, I don't want it hanging over us. I don't want Emma growing up thinking she broke your family apart. She didn't break anything, Victoria said sharply. They broke it themselves. I know that, you know that, but Emma's 7. She's going to wonder, she's going to carry that guilt. Daniel reached for Victoria's hand. I'm not saying we need their approval, I'm saying we need closure, one way or another. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the small yard where Emma's bike leaned against the fence. What do you suggest? One more conversation, Daniel said. Face to face. We tell them exactly how things are going to be. We give them a chance to be part of our lives, yours, mine, Emma's, on our terms. If they can't do that, then we have our answer and we move forward without them. And if they say no, then we get married anyway and we build our family without them. Victoria looked at him, searching his face. You're sure about this? You're willing to sit across from people who treated Emma like she was nothing? I'm willing to give them one chance to do better, Daniel said. Not for them, for you, because I know you love them, even when they hurt you. And I know cutting them off isn't as easy as you're pretending it is. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I hate that you're right. Daniel pulled her close. We'll do it together, united front. And if they can't accept that, then we walk away knowing we tried. Victoria nodded against his shoulder. Okay, I'll call them tomorrow. The meeting was set for the following Saturday afternoon at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant downtown, the kind of place with private dining rooms and attentive but discreet staff. Victoria's parents arrived first, already seated when Daniel and Victoria walked in. Constance looked as polished as ever in a cream-colored suit, her expression carefully neutral. Robert stood as they entered, his handshake with Daniel marginally warmer than last time, but still reserved. Victoria, Constance said, kissing the air beside her daughter's cheek. You look well. Thank you, Mother. Victoria's voice was cool but not hostile. Thank you both for agreeing to meet. They sat, Victoria and Daniel on one side of the table, her parents on the other. The symmetry felt deliberate, battle lines drawn. I assume this isn't a social call, Robert said, getting directly to the point. No, Victoria said. Daniel and I are planning to get married. We wanted to tell you ourselves before you heard it from someone else. Constance's expression flickered. Surprise. Then something harder to read. I see. And the child? Her name is Emma, Daniel said, keeping his voice even. And yes, she'll be part of our family. That's not negotiable. I wasn't suggesting otherwise, Constance said, though her tone suggested exactly that. I'm simply trying to understand the situation. The situation is straightforward, Victoria said. I'm marrying Daniel. Emma will be my stepdaughter. We're going to be a family. The question is whether you want to be part of that family or not. Victoria, darling, you can't expect us to simply... Constance started. I can expect basic decency, Victoria interrupted, her voice sharp. I can expect you to treat the man I love and his daughter with respect. I can expect you not to make a 7-year-old child feel unwanted in my presence. We were simply being realistic about the challenges of blended families, Robert said. You have no experience with children. Taking on someone else's child is a significant responsibility. Stop, Daniel said firmly. Both of Victoria's parents turned to look at him, clearly unused to being interrupted. With respect, you don't get to define what Emma is to Victoria. You don't get to call her a responsibility or a challenge or anything else that reduces her to an obstacle to be overcome. We're simply concerned for our daughter's well-being, Constance began. Are you? Victoria's voice was cold now. Because from where I'm sitting, you're more concerned about appearances.
About what your friends will think when I show up to events with a middle-class husband and a stepdaughter instead of a trust fund baby and biological grandchildren. The words hung in the air like a slap. Robert's face reddened. That's unfair, Victoria. Is it? Victoria leaned forward. When I told you I couldn't have children, Mother's first response was that adoption would be settling. When I introduced you to Daniel, you spent the entire evening making subtle digs about his job and his background. When Emma was sitting right there at your dinner table, you called her a challenge. Her voice shook with barely controlled anger. So tell me, Father, what part of that was concern for my well-being? Constance's mask of composure cracked slightly. We want you to be happy, Victoria. We want you to have the life you deserve. I have the life I deserve, Victoria said. I have a man who loves me, who sees me as a partner rather than a trophy. I have a brilliant little girl who's teaching me what it means to be patient and present and real. I have a family built on choice and love and showing up every day. She paused. What I don't have is parents who can celebrate that with me, and I need to know if that's going to change. The silence was heavy, broken only by the quiet clink of glasses from the main dining room beyond their closed door. Finally, Constance spoke, her voice quieter than before. What exactly are you asking us to do? Accept them, Victoria said simply. Accept Daniel and Emma as part of my life, as part of our family. Treat them with kindness and respect. Stop making Emma feel like she's unwanted or less than. She took a breath. I'm not asking you to pretend class differences don't exist. I'm not asking you to lower your standards or compromise your values. I'm asking you to see the people I love as worthy of basic human decency. And if we can't do that, Robert asked, though his voice had lost some of its edge. Then you're choosing not to be part of my life, Victoria said, and that will break my heart. But I'll survive, because I have a family that actually values me for who I am, not what I can provide them. Daniel reached under the table and squeezed Victoria's hand. She squeezed back, hard. Constance looked at Robert, some silent communication passing between them. Then she turned back to Victoria, and for the first time Daniel saw something in her face that might have been actual emotion. You really love him? Constance asked, her voice stripped of its usual polished tone. Yes, Victoria said without hesitation. I really do. And the child, Emma, she's important to you. She's everything to me, Victoria said. She's funny and creative and so much braver than I ever was at her age. She makes me want to be better. She makes me want to show up as the best version of myself. Constance was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I don't know if we can give you what you're asking for, not immediately. We come from a different world, Victoria. Different expectations. I know that, Victoria said. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for effort. I'm asking you to try. Robert cleared his throat. Perhaps we could start small. Dinner, the four of us. No party, no guests, just family. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't acceptance, not really, but it was something. Victoria looked at Daniel, questions in her eyes. He gave a small nod. Okay, Victoria said. Dinner. At our place. Daniel's and mine. You come to us, you see how we live, you meet Emma on her own territory, and you treat her with respect. When? Constance asked. Next Saturday, Victoria said. 6 o'clock. And Mother? If you make Emma cry again, if you make her feel unwanted in any way, that's the last time you'll see any of us. I mean that. Something shifted in Constance's expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. Understood. They finished the meeting quickly after that, details exchanged, polite goodbyes offered. As Daniel and Victoria walked to the car, Victoria was shaking. Did that just happen? She asked. I think so, Daniel said. I told my mother I'd cut her off if she hurts Emma again. You did. Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. I've never stood up to them like that before. Never. I noticed, Daniel said gently. How do you feel? Terrified, Victoria admitted. But also free? Is that weird? Not weird at all. Daniel pulled her into a hug. You were amazing in there. We were amazing, Victoria corrected. Did you see their faces when you interrupted them? I don't think anyone's done that in decades. Daniel laughed. I may have enjoyed that more than I should have. They stood there in the parking lot, holding each other, letting the adrenaline slowly drain away. What do we tell Emma? Victoria asked finally. The truth, Daniel said. That we talked to your parents, that they're going to come to dinner, that we're giving them a chance to be better, and that if they mess up, we're done trying. Victoria nodded. Okay. Together? Always together. Emma took the news better than Daniel expected. She was nervous about seeing Victoria's parents again, but when Victoria promised she'd be right there the whole time, Emma's shoulders relaxed. What if they're still mean? Emma asked, voicing the fear they were all carrying. Then they leave, Victoria said firmly, and we have ice cream for dinner and watch movies until we fall asleep. Sound good? Emma giggled. Ice cream isn't dinner. It is if I say so, Victoria said with mock seriousness. I'm going to be your stepmom. That gives me special dessert for dinner privileges. Emma's face lit up at the word stepmom, and Daniel felt his heart squeeze. This was really happening. They were really building this family together. The week leading up to dinner was tense. Victoria cleaned Daniel's house with an intensity that bordered on manic, reorganizing closets and scrubbing baseboards that hadn't been touched in years. Daniel cooked and recooked the planned menu, trying to find something that was impressive, but not trying too hard. Emma practiced polite conversation in the mirror, wanting to make a good impression. On Saturday morning, Emma had a meltdown. She stood in front of her closet in tears, pulling out dresses and throwing them on the floor. Nothing looks right, she sobbed. Everything's too babyish or too messy or wrong. Daniel knelt beside her. Em, what's really wrong? What if they still don't like me? Emma's voice was small and broken. What if I try really hard and I'm really good and they still think I'm not enough? The words cut straight through Daniel's heart. He pulled Emma into his lap. Then that's their failure, not yours. You are enough, Emma. You're more than enough. You're extraordinary. But what if Victoria realizes they're right? Emma whispered. What if she decides I'm too much trouble? Before Daniel could answer, Victoria's voice came from the doorway. That's never going to happen. Emma turned to see Victoria standing there, still in her pajamas, her hair unbrushed. Victoria sat down on the floor beside them. Emma, look at me. She waited until Emma met her eyes. I chose you. Not because you're easy or convenient or perfect. I chose you because you're you. Because you're smart and kind and creative and brave. Because when you laugh, it makes me want to laugh too. Because teaching you things makes me feel like I'm doing something that matters. Really? Emma's voice was tiny. Really, really, Victoria said. And here's the thing about my parents. Their opinion doesn't change how I feel about you. If they can't see how amazing you are, that's their loss. It doesn't make you less amazing. It makes them less observant. Emma managed a small smile. Less observant? Extremely unobservant, Victoria said seriously. Practically blind. Emma giggled, then threw her arms around Victoria's neck. Victoria held her tight, one hand stroking her hair. Over Emma's shoulder, Victoria met Daniel's eyes, and he saw his own fierce protectiveness reflected back at him. Whatever happened tonight, they were united. They were a team. By 6 o'clock, the house was as ready as it would ever be. Dinner was prepared, roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, nothing too fancy but undeniably good. The table was set with Daniel's mismatched plates and the nicer napkins Victoria had insisted on buying. Emma wore her favorite blue dress, her hair in careful braids courtesy of Victoria's surprisingly deft fingers. The doorbell rang at exactly 6. Daniel answered the door to find Constance and Robert standing on his small porch, looking distinctly uncomfortable in their expensive clothes surrounded by his neighborhood's modest homes. Constance held a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly grocery budget. Come in, Daniel said, stepping back. They entered cautiously, taking in the small living room with its second-hand furniture and Emma's art projects covering the refrigerator. Daniel watched them catalog every detail, the worn couch, the scuffed floors, the toy box overflowing in the corner. Emma stood beside Victoria near the kitchen, her hand gripping Victoria's tightly. Emma, Constance said, and her voice was different than last time, softer, more careful. It's nice to see you again. Emma looked up at Victoria, who nodded encouragingly. It's nice to see you too, Mrs. Lane. Please call me Constance, she said, then seemed to realize how formal that sounded for a child. Or, well, whatever feels comfortable. The evening started awkwardly, conversation stilted and careful. They sat at the dinner table and passed dishes with exaggerated politeness. Robert asked about Daniel's work with what seemed like genuine interest. Constance complimented the meal, and Daniel could tell it surprised her that it was actually good. Emma was quiet at first, answering questions in monosyllables. But then Robert asked about her art, and something shifted. "Victoria showed us some photos of your paintings," Robert said. "They're quite impressive for someone your age." Emma blinked, clearly surprised. "She did?" "She did," Constance confirmed. "The winter landscape particularly caught my eye. The use of color was sophisticated." Emma looked at Victoria, who smiled and nodded. Slowly, cautiously, Emma began to talk about her art class, about the techniques she was learning, about the mural project her school was planning. And Victoria's parents listened, really listened, asking follow-up questions, showing genuine interest. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, times when class differences showed in small ways. Constance's surprise at the paper napkins, Robert's careful navigation around discussing money. But they were trying, really trying. After dinner, Emma showed them her art room, the space Victoria had set up in her apartment, which she explained excitedly. Constance's expression when Emma described how Victoria taught her to use different brushes for different effects was unreadable. When it was time for Emma's bedtime, she surprised everyone by hugging Robert and Constance goodnight. Constance looked startled, her arms coming up stiffly to return the embrace. But when Emma pulled back and smiled up at her, something in Constance's face softened. After Emma went to bed, the four adults sat in the living room with coffee. The pretense of formality had worn away, leaving something more honest behind. "She's a lovely child," Constance said quietly. "Truly." "Thank you," Daniel said. "I owe you both an apology," Constance continued, and now she looked directly at Daniel. "At our dinner party, I was cruel. I let my disappointment about Victoria's choices that were never mine to make, turn into judgment of you and Emma. That was wrong." "Why were you disappointed?" Victoria asked, her voice careful. Constance was quiet for a long moment. "Because I wanted you to have everything easy, everything I didn't have. I married your father because it was a good match, because our families approved. We built a good life, but it was built on expectations rather than choice." She looked at Victoria. "When you couldn't have children, I was devastated. Not because of grandchildren, but because I knew how society would judge you, how limited your options would become." "So you tried to push me toward the right options," Victoria said. "Yes," Constance admitted. "And I was wrong. Watching you tonight with Daniel and Emma, I saw something I never had. You chose this. You built this. And you're happy." Victoria's eyes were bright with tears. "I am happy, Mother, happier than I've ever been." Robert cleared his throat. "We can't promise we'll always understand your choices. We come from different worlds, different values." "I'm not asking you to understand," Victoria said. I'm asking you to respect them, to respect us." "We can do that," Robert said, looking at Constance, who nodded. "We can absolutely do that." When Victoria's parents left an hour later, Constance hugged Victoria for real. Not the air kiss performance from before, but an actual embrace. "Thank you for giving us another chance," she said quietly. "Thank you for taking it," Victoria replied. After they left, Daniel and Victoria stood on the porch, watching the taillights disappear down the street. "Well," Daniel said finally, "that was unexpected." "That was my mother actually being vulnerable," Victoria said, sounding dazed. "I don't think I've ever heard her apologize before." "Do you think they meant it?" "I think they're trying," Victoria said, "which is more than I expected." She turned to face him. "Whatever happens next, we did this together. We stood up for ourselves, for Emma. We didn't back down." Daniel pulled her close. "We make a good team." "The best team," Victoria agreed. They stood there in the cool evening air, holding each other, while inside Emma slept peacefully and overhead the stars slowly appeared in the darkening sky. The future was still uncertain, still full of challenges and obstacles and things they'd have to navigate together. But for the first time, Daniel believed they could handle whatever came next. Because they'd chosen each other. And they'd keep choosing each other over and over for as long as it took. The months that followed the dinner felt like watching ice slowly thaw. Constance and Robert didn't transform overnight into warm, doting grandparents, but they showed up. They came to Emma's school art show and stood quietly in front of her paintings, asking thoughtful questions. They invited the three of them to Sunday brunch, neutral territory at first, then eventually at their home again, where Constance made a visible effort to include Emma in conversations, and Robert taught her a card game he'd played as a child. The changes were small, but consistent. Constance stopped making veiled comments about social status. Robert asked Daniel about his work with genuine curiosity, even offering connections that might help his career. When Emma showed them a story she'd written in school, Constance read it completely and discussed the plot with the seriousness it deserved. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, times when old patterns threatened to resurface. But Victoria held firm boundaries, and her parents seemed to recognize that their relationship with their daughter depended on treating her chosen family with respect. 3 months after that first tentative dinner, Victoria proposed. It happened on a Saturday morning in late September. Daniel was making pancakes while Emma sat at the kitchen counter doing homework and Victoria scrolled through her tablet, reading news. It was ordinary, domestic, the kind of moment that made up the fabric of their shared life. Victoria set down her tablet and said, "Daniel, can you come here for a second?" He turned from the stove, spatula still in hand. "What's up?" Victoria slid off her stool and, to Daniel's complete shock, got down on one knee. Emma gasped. Daniel froze. "I know we've talked about getting married," Victoria said, her voice surprisingly steady. "But I realized I never actually asked you properly. I never made it official." She pulled a small box from her pocket and opened it, revealing a simple gold band. "Daniel Moore, you've taught me what it means to show up every day. You've shown me that family isn't about perfection or meeting expectations. It's about choice and consistency and love. You've made me braver than I ever thought I could be." Daniel couldn't speak. His throat was tight, his eyes burning. Victoria turned slightly to include Emma. "And Emma, you've taught me that love isn't always complicated. Sometimes it's as simple as showing up, listening, and being present. You've made me want to be the best version of myself." She looked back at Daniel. "So I'm asking you both. Will you marry me? Will you let me be part of this family, officially, and forever?" Emma was already crying, nodding frantically. Daniel managed to set down the spatula before he dropped it. "Yes," he said, his voice rough. "Yes. Absolutely yes." Victoria's careful composure cracked into a brilliant smile. She stood, and Daniel pulled her into a kiss while Emma shrieked with joy and threw herself at both of them, wrapping her arms around their legs. They stood there in the kitchen, the three of them tangled together, while the pancakes burned on the stove and smoke detectors started beeping, and none of them cared at all. Victoria slipped the ring onto Daniel's finger. It fit perfectly. "How long have you been planning this?" Daniel asked when they finally pulled apart. 2 weeks, Victoria admitted. "Emma helped me pick out the ring." Daniel looked at his daughter, who was grinning so wide her face had to hurt. "You knew?" "Victoria asked my permission," Emma said proudly. "She wanted to make sure I was okay with it." "And what did you say?" "I said yes immediately," Emma said. "And then I cried for like 10 minutes. Daniel laughed, pulling them both close again. "When do you want to do this?" "Soon," Victoria said. "Nothing big, just us and the people who matter." They set the date for November, 6 weeks away. Just enough time to plan something small and meaningful, not enough time to overthink or let anxiety build. The ceremony would be simple: a judge, a few close friends, Victoria's parents if they chose to come. They'd hold it in the park where Victoria had first met Emma, the place where this fragile family had taken its first tentative steps toward becoming real. When they told Constance and Robert over dinner that week, Daniel braced for resistance or subtle attempts to take over the planning. Instead, Constance simply reached across the table and squeezed Victoria's hand. "I'm happy for you," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. "You'll come?" Victoria asked, and Daniel heard the vulnerability in her voice. "Of course we'll come. Robert said. "We wouldn't miss it." Emma, who'd been quiet through most of the dinner, suddenly spoke up. "Will you sit with me? During the wedding?" Constance looked startled.
You want us to? Yeah, Emma said. Victoria's going to be standing up there getting married, and Daddy too. I don't want to sit by myself. Something passed across Constance's face. Surprise, then what looked like genuine emotion. We would be honored to sit with you, Emma. The 6 weeks passed in a blur of small preparations. Daniel and Victoria applied for their marriage license. Emma helped Victoria choose flowers, simple autumn arrangements in deep reds and golds. Victoria bought a dress, elegant and understated, while Daniel got his one good suit cleaned and pressed. Emma picked out a new dress, purple with silver stars, and practiced walking carefully in her new shoes. Mrs. Chen, when told about the wedding, cried actual tears and insisted on making the cake. Daniel's co-workers pooled money for a gift. Victoria's small circle of close friends organized a dinner the night before the ceremony, warm and full of laughter.
The night before the wedding, after Emma was asleep, Daniel and Victoria sat on the back porch with glasses of wine, looking up at the stars. "Having second thoughts?" Daniel asked, only half joking. "Not even close," Victoria said. "You?" "Terrified," Daniel admitted, "but not second thoughts. Just, this is really happening." "It really is." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "A year ago, I never could have imagined this. I thought I'd be alone forever. I thought the best I could hope for was a successful career and maybe some good friends." "And now?" "Now I have everything I didn't know I needed," Victoria said simply. "I have you. I have Emma. I have a family that chose me back." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Sarah would have liked you." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "You think so?" "I know so. She would have appreciated how direct you are, how you don't play games or hide what you're thinking. She would have loved how you are with Emma." I wish I could have met her," Victoria said softly. "Me too." Daniel took a breath. "I need to tell you something. I'm going to think about her tomorrow, during the wedding, not because I'm comparing or because I'm not fully present with you, but because she's part of how I got here, part of what made me who I am." "I hope you do think about her," Victoria said. "She's Emma's mother. She's part of your story. I never want you to feel like you have to hide that or pretend it didn't matter." Daniel pulled her closer. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Victoria corrected. "We found each other on literally the worst night, and we chose to be brave enough to try." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together. "Thank you," Daniel said finally. "For what?" "For seeing us. For not walking away when you had every reason to. For fighting for this when I was too scared to fight for myself." Victoria turned to look at him, her gray eyes serious in the starlight. "You fought too, Daniel. You came back. You chose courage over fear. That's not nothing. We make a good team." "The best team," Victoria agreed. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, autumn sunlight filtering through bare branches. The park was beautiful in its late-season starkness, fallen leaves creating a carpet of gold and crimson. Daniel woke early, nerves jangling through his system. He made breakfast for Emma, who was too excited to eat. Victoria had spent the night at her apartment. She'd insisted on at least that one tradition, and would meet them at the park. Mrs. Chen arrived at 9 to help Emma get ready, brushing her hair until it shone and helping her into the purple dress. Daniel put on his suit, fumbling with his tie until Emma had to help him, her small fingers surprisingly deft. "You look handsome, Daddy," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "You look beautiful, Em," he replied, and had to blink back tears. They arrived at the park at 10:30. A small group was already gathering. Daniel's co-workers, a few of Victoria's friends, Mrs. Chen dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Constance and Robert stood near the front, looking uncomfortable in the casual outdoor setting, but present nonetheless. The judge was a kind-faced woman in her 60s who Daniel had met once before to go over the ceremony. She stood beneath a pergola that the Parks Department had decorated with simple white fabric and autumn flowers. And then Victoria arrived. She wore a knee-length dress the color of champagne, simple and elegant, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She carried a small bouquet of rust-colored roses. She looked nervous and happy and absolutely radiant. Daniel's breath caught. Emma grabbed his hand and squeezed. Victoria walked toward them, no processional music or dramatic entrance. Just her, choosing to cross that space and join them. When she reached them, she took Daniel's free hand and Emma's other hand, completing the circle. "Ready?" the judge asked, smiling. "Ready," they said together. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. The judge spoke about marriage as a choice made every day, about family as something built rather than something given. Victoria and Daniel exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises to show up, to choose courage, to build something real together. When the judge asked for the rings, Emma stepped forward importantly, carrying the small pillow she'd decorated herself. Victoria slipped a band onto Daniel's finger to match the one she'd given him when she proposed. Daniel slid a ring onto Victoria's finger, his hands trembling slightly. "I have one more thing," Victoria said, and pulled out a third ring, a smaller version of hers, delicate and perfect for a child's hand. She knelt down to Emma's level. "Emma Moore, I can't be your biological mother. I can't replace the mom you lost, but I can promise to show up for you every single day. I can promise to love you, support you, and be there when you need me. Would you let me be your family, officially?" Emma was crying, nodding frantically. Victoria slipped the ring onto her finger and Emma threw her arms around Victoria's neck. There wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering. The judge, her own voice thick with emotion, pronounced Daniel and Victoria married. They kissed, gentle and sweet, while Emma stood between them, holding both their hands. The celebration afterward was simple. Sandwiches and cake in the park shelter, laughter and stories and toasts. Mrs. Chen's cake was perfect. 3 layers of chocolate with buttercream frosting. Emma managed to get frosting on her nose, and Victoria wiped it off with gentle fingers. Daniel watched his new wife teaching Emma how to make a toast properly, watched Constance actually laughing at something Robert said, watched all these disparate pieces of their life fitting together into something coherent and real. At one point, Constance approached him, holding a glass of champagne. "May I speak with you?" she asked. Daniel tensed reflexively, but followed her a short distance away from the crowd. "I wanted to apologize again," Constance said, "more thoroughly this time. When I first met you, I saw only what you didn't have. The right background, the right connections. I didn't see what you did have." She paused. "You're a good father, Daniel. You're patient and present, and you love that little girl with everything you have. And you've made my daughter happier than I've ever seen her." "Thank you," Daniel said, not quite sure how to respond. "I also wanted to tell you something about Victoria," Constance continued. "She's always been brilliant, always been driven, but she's never been soft, never let herself be vulnerable." She looked over at where Victoria was laughing with Emma. "You've given her permission to be human, to make mistakes, to build something messy and real instead of perfect and empty." Her voice caught. "That's a gift I never managed to give her, so thank you." Daniel felt his own throat tighten. "She gave us a gift too. She saw Emma not as a burden, but as a person worth knowing. She gave my daughter something I couldn't give her alone, a family that chose her." Constance nodded. "Perhaps we can all keep giving each other that gift. The gift of choice and presence and showing up even when it's hard." "I'd like that," Daniel said. They stood together for a moment, this unlikely alliance, watching the family they'd both contributed to in different ways. Later, as the sun began to set and guests started to leave, Emma tugged on Victoria's dress. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said quietly. "Always." "What should I call you now? You're married to Daddy, so you're kind of my mom, but you said you're not replacing my real mom, so I don't know." Victoria knelt down, bringing herself to Emma's eye level. "What feels right to you?" Emma thought for a moment. "Maybe Mom Victoria? So I can have 2 moms, the one I had and the one I have now?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "That sounds perfect, sweetheart." "Okay." Emma seemed satisfied with this solution. Then she added, "I'm glad Daddy found you. I'm glad you found us." "Me too," Victoria said, pulling Emma into a hug. "Me too, baby girl." As darkness fell and the park emptied, it was just the 3 of them left, Daniel, Victoria, and Emma. They walked slowly back to the car, Emma between them, holding both their hands. "Well," Daniel said, "we did it. We're officially a family." "We were already a family," Emma corrected. "Now it's just official."
"Smart kid," Victoria said, exchanging a smile with Daniel over Emma's head. They drove home, to Daniel's house, which was Victoria's house now too, which was their house. Inside, they changed into comfortable clothes and settled on the couch, Emma wedged between them. "Can we watch a movie?" Emma asked. "We can do whatever you want," Daniel said. "It's a special day." Emma picked one of her favorites, something they'd seen a dozen times before. But it didn't matter. What mattered was being together, the three of them, in this moment they'd fought so hard to reach. Halfway through the movie, Emma fell asleep, her head on Victoria's lap, her feet in Daniel's. Victoria stroked Emma's hair absently, her other hand linked with Daniel's. "I keep thinking about that night," Victoria said softly. "Christmas night, in that restaurant. How desperate I felt. How certain I was that I'd be alone forever." "I felt the same way," Daniel admitted. "I thought Emma and I would always be just the two of us, that no one would ever be willing to take us both. And now look at us," Victoria said. "Married, a family, with my parents actually trying to be decent human beings." Daniel laughed quietly. "Your mom's apology today was unexpected." "Everything about this has been unexpected," Victoria said. "In the best possible way." She looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully between them. "We built this, Daniel. We chose it, piece by piece. That makes it stronger than anything that just happens by accident." "You really believe that?" "I know that," Victoria said firmly. "Love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day. To show up, to be present, to work through the hard stuff together." She squeezed his hand. "I choose you. I choose Emma. I choose this every single day." "Every single day," Daniel echoed. They finished the movie in comfortable silence, neither wanting to move and disturb Emma. When it ended, Daniel carefully lifted his daughter and carried her to bed. Victoria followed, and together they tucked Emma in. Emma stirred slightly as they pulled up her blanket. "Love you," she mumbled, not quite awake. "Love you too, sweetheart," Victoria whispered. "Love you, Em," Daniel added. They stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her sleep, this child who had brought them together in the most unexpected way. In their own room later, Daniel and Victoria got ready for bed with the comfortable ease of people who'd been sharing space for months. Victoria brushed her teeth while Daniel set his alarm. They climbed into bed from opposite sides, meeting in the middle. "So," Victoria said, settling into Daniel's arms, "how does it feel to be married?" "Honestly, exactly like yesterday, but also completely different." Daniel kissed her forehead. "How about you?" "Same. It's like everything shifted just slightly, like the world rearranged itself to make room for this version of us." They were quiet for a moment, just breathing together in the dark. "Thank you," Daniel said. "You keep thanking me." "Because I keep being grateful," he said simply. "You walked into my life on the worst night of the year, and you changed everything. You gave me hope when I thought I was out of it. You gave Emma a mother when she'd resigned herself to having none. You gave us both a future we didn't think we could have." "You did the same for me," Victoria said. "I was so lonely, Daniel. I didn't even realize how lonely until I wasn't anymore. You and Emma, you made me feel like I belonged somewhere, like I mattered for who I am, not what I've accomplished." "You do matter," Daniel said fiercely. "You matter so much." Victoria shifted to look at him, just barely visible in the dim light from the street lamp outside. "We're going to be okay, aren't we? All the challenges ahead, Emma growing up, your job, my company, my parents, all of it. We're going to figure it out together." "Yeah," Daniel said with certainty. "We are. Because we choose each other. Every day, we choose this." Victoria kissed him, slow and deep and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I love you, husband," Victoria said, testing out the word. "I love you, wife," Daniel replied. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, their breathing synchronizing in the quiet darkness. Down the hall, Emma slept peacefully, the ring on her finger catching the moonlight. Outside, the city hummed with life, indifferent to small miracles happening in quiet bedrooms. But inside this house, something extraordinary had happened. A single father who'd thought himself unlovable. A successful woman who'd resigned herself to loneliness. A little girl who'd lost her mother and found another.
They'd found each other through chance and courage, through honesty and choice. They'd built a family not through biology or tradition or expectation, but through the daily decision to show up, to try, to love, even when it was scary. It wasn't perfect. There would be hard days ahead, moments of doubt, challenges they couldn't yet imagine. Victoria's parents would slip back into old patterns sometimes. Emma would struggle with having two mothers, one remembered, one present. Daniel would wake some mornings still missing Sarah, still carrying that old grief. But they would face it together. They would choose each other, over and over, through every difficulty and joy. Because that's what family meant, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of people willing to struggle alongside you. On a Christmas night 11 months earlier, Daniel had sat in a restaurant, humiliated and alone, certain his life would always be defined by rejection. Victoria had been at another table, equally lonely, equally resigned to a future without real connection. And then Victoria had done something crazy. She'd approached a stranger with an impossible proposal. She'd chosen courage over comfort, vulnerability over safety. They'd both chosen courage that night, and they'd kept choosing it every day since. Now, in the quiet hours after their wedding, they slept peacefully in their shared home, their shared life, their chosen family. The ring on Daniel's finger caught the light. The ring on Victoria's finger glinted in the darkness. Down the hall, Emma's smaller ring sparkled on her small hand. 3 rings, 3 promises, 3 people who'd found each other against all odds and decided to build something real. A family. Not perfect, but chosen. Not easy, but worth it. Every single day, worth it. And in the morning, they would wake up and choose it all over again.